Hello and welcome back to another episode of Indistinct Chatter. I'm Aliza and I'm so grateful, so happy you're here. There is a lot happening right now. The release of the Epstein files documents has been a lot, to say the least. I won't pretend that it hasn't been kind of all consuming. I know that I've had to be careful how much I read because I keep having some insane nightmares. And I think it's because of what I'm reading before I go to sleep. It genuinely messes with your head, just to put it lightly. We're watching information get released, redacted, reframed, sometimes all at once. And whether you call it flooding the zone, muddying the waters, or just chaos, the result is still the same. It's overwhelming and it's hard to process. It's hard to know what's complete, what's edited, what's missing. And at the center of it is something simple and ugly: people with power harming other people. I don't know about you, but I grew up believing that if you harm someone, especially someone vulnerable, that's wrong. Period. It's not that hard to comprehend. I might unpack more of this in the future, but right now there's not a whole lot of clarity. So today I want to zoom out for a minute, not because it doesn't matter or because we shouldn't be keeping that on the forefront or holding people accountable. I just think that sometimes when everything feels dark and chaotic, stepping back helps you see patterns more clearly. And I guess this isn't like going to be the most happy doo-dah episode, but I'm taking us to the weather. And I know weather is typically small talk, water cooler talk, boring, whatever. I get it. But stay with me, please. It's mid-February, and on the Front Range, this is typically when we are starting to get some good snow dumps. February and March are usually our snowiest stretch of the year, and on average, we'd expect several inches by now, like 7 or 8 inches or so, with March often bringing the biggest storms of the season, sometimes bringing us over a foot of snow. However, this year, we've only had one snowfall that has actually stuck around longer than a day. We are in what is being called a snow drought. Snowpack along parts of the Front Range is significantly below average, like 50% or more below. And according to climatologists, we would need some serious late season storms to even approach normal totals, like record-breaking storms. At the same time, temperatures have been consistently above normal. We have been in the 60s and even 70s most of this winter. And don't get me wrong, it's been sunny, it's been nice. I've been sitting on my balcony almost every day. Windows are always open. But it's also been dry, very dry, and windy. In some parts of the state, we've had over 100-mile-per-hour winds this winter. And when Colorado is warm, dry, and windy, people start becoming a little bit more alert. Today, much of the Front Range is under a red flag warning. And this is not the kind of red flag you warn your friend about when she starts dating a questionable guy. A red flag warning is issued by the National Weather Service when critical fire weather conditions are either happening or expected within 24 hours. That means low humidity, strong winds, and dry fuels like grasses, brush, trees, they can all ignite easily and spread fast. It's essentially the take this seriously alert for fire conditions. It's kind of like the tornado siren of fire alerts, only no sirens here, just a bunch of alerts on my phone. So right now, no outdoor burning, avoid yard equipment that could spark, don't park on dry grass, make sure trailer chains aren't dragging, fully extinguish your cigarettes. And in rural areas especially, people are reviewing their evacuation plans. They're making sure their go bags are ready. Because when we are under a red flag warning, the question isn't just if a fire could start, it's how. Is it going to be lightning, arson, a freak accident, or a person? I think a lot of us picture a dramatic lightning strike cracking across the mountain ridge somewhere miles from civilization. And yes, lightning absolutely starts fires in Colorado, especially during late summer monsoon season when we get dry thunderstorms, which is just lots of lightning, not much rain. Some people might call it dry lightning, dry thunder, heat lightning. Those strikes can ignite high elevation forests, and in many ecosystems, periodic fire is actually natural and even necessary. But here's the part that surprises people. Or maybe it doesn't. In Colorado, the majority of wildfires are started by people, not lightning, and most of them aren't dramatic. It's not some dude with a gas can and a lighter, usually. Usually it's ordinary, preventable moments. Maybe it's an unattended campfire that wasn't fully drowned out. Someone maybe was burning debris and it got away from them. A lawnmower blade might have hit a rock, causing a spark. A trailer chain dragging and throwing sparks. A hot vehicle parked over dry grass. Target shooting in dry conditions. Fireworks. A cigarette tossed from a car window. Downed power lines. Or even a prescribed burn that escaped. And on days like today, when humidity is low, fuels are dry, and winds are strong, the spark doesn't have to be big. It just has to exist. And most human-caused fires don't start deep in the untouched boonies of the wilderness. They start near roads, neighborhoods, trails, towns. They start near people. That's why red flag warnings matter so much. Because during conditions like this, we're not just watching the sky for lightning. We're all collectively hoping that no one makes a small mistake. Because in Colorado, a small mistake can become the largest fire in state history. And I'm not being dramatic here. It happened. In August of 2020, a fire started near Cameron Pass in north central Colorado. At first, it didn't seem historic. It wasn't a wall of flame barreling toward a city on day one. It wasn't even the only major fire burning in the state at the time. But it kept going and going and going. And that fire became the Cameron Peak Fire. On the afternoon of August 13th, 2020, multiple hikers reported a fire in Roosevelt National Forest, just northwest of the Chambers Lake recreational area. CDOT closed Highway 14 from Rustic to Gould the very next day in response to fire activity near the highway. Then the fire crossed Highway 14 in a second location and spread rapidly. So 3 days from the start, now we're on August 16th, the fire has spread 10,867 acres. It was fueled by hot and dry weather and steep terrain, with fire burning through heavy beetle kill near Barnes Meadow Reservoir. On that same day, aerial firefighting aircraft began with a DC-10 air tanker dropping fire retardant on the north end of the fire. The next evening, winds started pushing the fire in all directions, leading to the first evacuation orders around Chambers Lake and Spencer Heights. Helicopters then began dropping water on the west side of Highway 14 and Long Draw Road. However, the fire continued to spread in all directions over the next several days. By August 22nd, Highway 14's closure was extended east towards the Kelly Flats campground as the fire grew more towards the southeast, and by the end of August, the fire expanded to 23,022 acres with only 5% contained. Now, to put it in perspective, that's about 36 square miles, which is just a little bit bigger than Manhattan. You could fit approximately 17,400 football fields, including end zones, in this space. And it burned for over 3 months, not being 100% contained until December 2nd of 2020. It consumed more than 208,663 acres, which is over 325 square miles. So that's about the size of San Diego or Austin, larger than New York City, almost the size of Berlin, Germany, larger than Zion National Park, and only slightly smaller than Rocky Mountain National Park. If you walked the entire perimeter, like if this burn space was a perfect square, it would take you 24 hours to walk the perimeter at a brisk pace without any breaks. Huge, big, giant. It forced over 20,000 people to evacuate, many across Larimer and Jackson counties. It destroyed 469 structures, including 224 residential structures and 220 outbuildings, along with 17 business structures. And it took over 1,000 people fighting the fire, including helicopters and air tankers, costing roughly $134 million just to fight the fire. Smoke blanketed the Front Range for weeks. It closed 2 million acres of land in Rocky Mountain National Park, Arapahoe, and Roosevelt National Forests. It officially became the largest wildfire in Colorado's recorded history. The U.S. Forest Service is still investigating the exact cause, but it is believed that it was human caused between Chambers Lake Campground and Cameron Peak. And I mentioned this wasn't the only major fire at the time. The Cameron Peak fire burned concurrently with the East Troublesome fire near Kremlin, Colorado, torching a combined 400,000 acres. So one ignition during dry conditions with wind. That's all it takes. So Cameron Peak shows just how devastating a human-caused ignition can be, allegedly human-caused, even in remote areas with lots of forests. But it wasn't the first time a single spark or a human mistake reshaped Colorado forever. And again, not being dramatic, but you can still see the burn scars. In 2002, nearly 2 decades before the Cameron Peak fire, Colorado experienced the Hayman fire, which held the title for largest wildfire in Colorado history at the time. Unlike with the Cameron Peak fire, the cause of the Hayman fire was very clear. By the afternoon of June 8, 2002, the Pike National Forest was already hot, dry, and restless. The early summer air was heavy with heat, and the winds that had been gusting all day whispered through the trees, carrying a hint of something a little bit more dangerous. Patrolling these woods that day was Terry Barton, a longtime veteran Forest Service employee. She likely knew the forest like the back of her hand, every trail, every creek, every patch of dry grass. She's kind of the first line of defense against wildfire, the person communities relied on to spot trouble before it got out of hand. And around 4:55 p.m., Terry called the dispatch center to report smoke she saw while on patrol. At first, it seemed small, just a flicker among the pines, maybe just 1 acre. Fire crews were dispatched, expecting a routine brush fire, but the fire had other plans. Within 24 to 48 hours, fueled by drought-dry vegetation and gusty winds, the fire exploded to over 60,000 acres, spreading across trails, campgrounds, and forested hillsides. Evacuations went out, helicopters and air tankers scrambled, and communities collectively braced themselves, hoping the fire would be controlled soon. As investigators pieced together the events, something didn't add up. Terry, who had first responded to smoke herself, was questioned about the fire's origin. Eventually, she admitted the truth. The fire had started with her. Earlier that afternoon, she had burned a letter from her estranged husband in a campsite fire ring. She said it was an emotional act. She wanted to get rid of the letter and thought the fire was out before leaving. But in those dry, windy conditions, embers escaped, igniting grasses and trees. Later in court, one of Terry's daughters testified that Terry lied again, saying that Terry hadn't burned a letter from her estranged husband, that she had been told by a psychology teacher to write her feelings in a letter and burn it. So that single spark grew into the Hayman fire, which burned for roughly 2 weeks and consumed over 138,000 acres across 4 different counties. The fire destroyed 133 homes and forced over 5,000 people to evacuate. It cost nearly $40 million for hundreds of firefighters to battle the blaze. Smoke could be seen and smelled in all directions for miles. 55 miles northwest in Vail, 188 miles east in Burlington, 50 miles north in Broomfield, and 130 miles south in Walsenburg. The Hayman fire directly resulted in the death of a civilian, and 5 firefighters were killed en route to the fire. Record amounts of particulate matter were measured in the air while the fire burned, which are microscopic particles of solid or liquid matter. It's not just one pollutant, it's a mix of acids, metals, soil, dust, and other organic chemicals that everyone was just breathing in. As a result of the fire, like after many fires, flooding increased. Many roads and bridges were washed out, including State Highway 67, which is the main highway running through the area. Sediment runoff contaminated a reservoir used as a water source for Denver, costing $25 million to remove. The fire caused the closure of a large part of Pike National Forest, as well as 11 Mile State Park and Spiny State Park, resulting in local tourism being cut by 50%. For a Forest Service veteran, someone trained to prevent wildfires, it was a devastating reminder of how even a small human action can unleash massive consequences. And honestly, why? Why did you have to go into the forest to burn a letter? I'm so confused. You know better. In December of 2002, Terry pleaded guilty to setting fire to federal forest land and lying to investigators. She was given a 6-year sentence in federal prison. Then in March of 2008, Terry was resentenced by a different judge to 15 years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. Then in 2018, Terry's sentence was extended another 15 years in the form of unsupervised probation, as well as $14.5 million in restitution. She was also ordered by a judge. I can't believe she had to be ordered by a judge for this, but she was ordered by a judge to get a full-time job. Girl, you had to be ordered to get a full-time job when you owe $14.5 million? The Hayman fire is a cautionary tale of human error, vigilance, and the raw power of nature. And while it's easy to see it as a tragedy of one person's mistake, it's also about how conditions like dry fuels, high winds, and human carelessness can combine to produce disaster. So, like Smokey Bear's been saying, which Terry should have known, only you can prevent wildfires. Also, did he used to say forest fires, or has it always been wildfires? I feel like I grew up with him saying only you can prevent forest fires. And I remember always saying Smokey the Bear, not Smokey Bear. Is that just me? Is it a Mandela effect? Has it changed over the years? I sense a deep dive next week about Smokey Bear. We'll see. But this lesson echoes today as we look at more recent fires like the Marshall Fire in 2021, where human actions and infrastructure decisions again played a central role. And just like the Hayman Fire, the Marshall Fire was a stark reminder that in Colorado, disaster can strike fast, sometimes faster than anyone expects. Unlike the Hayman Fire, where a single human action in the backcountry sparked weeks of destruction, the Marshall Fire unfolded in one of the state's most populated areas, and infrastructure played a major role. On December 30th, 2021, just after 11 a.m., the first calls started coming in to Boulder County Dispatch. A fire had been spotted near the small town of Marshall, south of Boulder, and at first, it seemed like a grass fire, one of those brush blazes firefighters see and put out routinely. It's often what's most expected, but the conditions that day were not expected. The wind was poppin'. Gusts were between 70 and 100 miles per hour in parts of Boulder and along the foothills. There was barely any fuel moisture left in the dormant grass and brush, so that meant once something ignited, the fire could move fast. And spoiler alert, it did. Firefighters and a sheriff's deputy reached the scene within minutes of the initial report, but as one firefighter said on the radio, they couldn't find the flames. Smoke was everywhere, but the fire itself seemed almost invisible. There was a low-hanging wire that obstructed Marshall Road, so the road was closed right away. Then around 11:21, just south along a dirt road, a small grass fire was found. And within 3 minutes of its discovery, it was determined to be out of control. 3 minutes. Then, within hours, what started as a grass fire had grown beyond containment. Fueled by hurricane-force winds, the blaze ran east into Superior, Louisville, and unincorporated Boulder County. In less than a day, it had burned more than 6,000 acres, moving at speeds up to 100 miles per hour in places, before being put to an end by a heavy snowfall over New Year's Eve and day. The fire destroyed over 1,000 homes and structures, becoming the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history, and forced 37,500 people to evacuate. 2 residents lost their lives, along with over 1,000 pets, including horses, goats, and cows. Damages later surpassed $2 billion, with a B. The fire caused all water systems in the area to lose power, and 6 public drinking water systems were damaged. This resulted in firefighting support being jeopardized and allowed for contamination of water distribution, and the fire also exposed people to dangerous airborne compounds. So now you have dangerous air and water. For months after the fire, there was speculation and confusion about what had actually ignited it. Many theories circulated around. Some people thought down to power lines, underground coal seams. Some people thought maybe even long smoldering debris. But the truth took a little bit more time to come into fruition, into the light, whatever the saying is. In June 2023, after a nearly 18-month investigation, Boulder County Sheriff Curtis Johnson and the District Attorney's Office announced their findings. They concluded that the Marshall Fire started from two separate ignition points that eventually merged into one devastating blaze. The first fire was a result of embers from an earlier fire. A fire started on December 24th, 2021, on a property owned by a group called the 12 Tribes. That fire was buried after it was believed extinguished, but when the extreme winds returned on December 30th, they uncovered those embers, exposing them to oxygen and dry fuels, ultimately reigniting the blaze. Week old embers. Who knew? The second fire started near the Marshall Mesa trailhead, which was about an hour later and roughly 2,000 feet away. Investigators found evidence that a power line owned by Xcel Energy became loose and started sparking, and it was discharging hot particles onto the dry grass below, ultimately igniting another fire. These two fires, separated by time and distance, were both pushed by the same unrelenting wind, and before long, they became one massive blaze, racing east towards homes and people. Even though investigators identified these ignition points, no criminal charges were filed against Xcel Energy or anyone connected with the earlier 12 Tribes debris fire. Authorities determined that while the evidence showed how the fires likely started, there wasn't enough to prove criminal negligence. But the legal battle didn't stop there. Hundreds of homeowners, insurers, and local governments filed civil lawsuits against Xcel Energy, arguing the utility should be held responsible for the fire that destroyed entire Boulder County neighborhoods. Those claims accused Xcel of failure to prevent ignition from their equipment, even though the company maintained it did nothing wrong. In September 2025, just before a massive civil trial was set to begin, Xcel Energy, along with co-defendants Quest, or maybe it's QWest Corporation, and Teleport Communications America, LLC, agreed to a settlement reported to be around $640 million to resolve all litigation related to the fire. Both of those co-defendants, Quest or QWest and Teleport, they were included in the settlement alongside Xcel because their equipment was present on the same power poles that were part of the legal claims related to the fire. They, along with Xcel, did not admit fault, wrongdoing, or negligence under the settlement terms, but they agreed to contribute to resolving the lawsuits as part of the overall agreement and said customers would not bear the cost. In Colorado, utilities like Xcel sometimes shut off power proactively when high winds and red flag conditions hit, with the stated goal of preventing fires that start from electrical equipment coming into contact with vegetation. Many of us have seen those alerts. The lights go out, crews warn of high wind risk, and lines go silent in an effort to prevent sparks. Businesses shut down. It's a whole shebang. Some people argue this approach doesn't go far enough, or that utilities use it as a scapegoat to avoid investing in safer infrastructure. They point out that burying power lines, like in most of my town, insulating equipment, and modernizing systems could reduce fire risk without cutting power to homes and businesses, especially in known wind corridors. Some believe companies like Xcel could afford these upgrades but won't spend the money unless compelled by regulation or public pressure. Others say shutting off power is a necessary compromise when conditions are extreme. But the Marshall Fire and the enormous settlement around it has pushed the conversation further. If wind-driven fire risk is a known threat and infrastructure plays a role in ignition, what should utilities have to do to protect communities? I mean, just the other day, while we were on a walk, we noticed that all the brush had been cut down and mowed and removed near the power line trail. That's the community preparing. Shouldn't utilities do everything they can do so their customers don't all die? I don't know, just spitballing here. The Marshall Fire wasn't a forest fire deep in the wilderness. It was a suburban firestorm that took homes, disrupted entire communities, and collided with questions about corporate responsibility, public safety, and the limits of individual error. It showed that even in places you don't think of as fire country, the same elements, fire weather, wind, dry fuels, and human-related ignition sources, can combine into something devastating. And as Colorado watches another dry, windy winter turn into fire season, the lessons of these wildfires are still very much alive. I mean, I've always known that wildfires are dangerous. Obviously, it's fire. But until the Alexander Mountain Fire in 2024, I didn't really realize just how consuming, how fast, how dangerous wildfires truly are. Like, I didn't understand the scale of it. Um, it's kind of like a whale. Until you are near one, you don't really understand how big they are. Like, I can't comprehend the size of a whale because I've never actually seen one. That's how I felt about these wildfires because I've never actually been near a wildfire. And the Alexander Mountain Fire wasn't nearly as large as the ones I talked about today, but it did burn up almost 10,000 acres over the course of 19 days. It destroyed 26 homes, and it was also human caused by someone impersonating a firefighter, allegedly. I don't know if they've officially charged him, or I don't know if he's been found guilty. There were over 5,000 people who were evacuated, and I remember a bunch of people going up to Horsetooth to watch the planes come and scoop up the water in order to take it to put out the fire. And at the time, I was working for an events company, and we were on red alert to set up evacuation tents at the ranch. We were constantly checking live updates as it got closer and closer. The smell, the lighting outside, the whole waiting around trying to tell yourself it won't get to you. But I mean, like the Marshall Fire, I mean, these things move fast. The Marshall Fire moved in spots 100 miles per hour. That's faster than most people can drive away. Like, I feel like that's something I don't think people realize about these wildfires. They're fast, they're disorienting. When you're in them, you can't tell direction. You don't even know if it's day or night outside. It's insane and it's so scary. And I don't think people take them seriously enough. And while each fire has its own story, there's often a common pattern that is usually small sparks that, under the right conditions, turn disastrous. I grew up always on alert for tornado weather all the time. Well, not all the time, but like in the summer. But now it's the red flag warnings. And they're not just these little cute alerts like, hey, this could happen. No fireworks today. It's not that type of alert. These are reminders that sometimes things can't be controlled and you need to be prepared and you need to be vigilant and you need to be responsible. Obviously, fires will always be a part of Colorado's story. I mean, take it from Smokey. Only you can prevent wildfires. And take it from Hayman. Don't be a Terry. That's all I have for you this week. Take care of yourselves. Don't be done with fire. We will chat next week. Love ya. Love you. Bye.